Hey guys, what's up? This is Falsebooles123, and this is day 41 of my vlogging challenge. So, feeling a little iffy just because of everything that's happening with the quarantine, going stir crazy if we're being honest, but I don't want to really talk about that because life is sad and depressing and sucks sometimes, and that's not what this channel is about. This channel is a way for me to not have life suck and be depressing and suck all the time and just to enjoy ourselves in front of the camera with you guys. So, I'm trying to be that amount of escapism, both for my lovely audience and for myself, which I think is a valid endeavor. Now, what are we talking about today, Ryan? I'm glad you asked, and that is my very, very uncommon segment. I should do this more often. My entertainment corner! How many corners do you have, Ryan? This is gonna be a fuck more, so don't you worry. Anyway, I think one of the reasons why I don't talk about, the things I watch and the media I consume very much is that for the most part, most of the shows I decide to watch are usually something I talk about in my bullying blog. So I don't really have I keep myself very busy, as you can tell. I mean, I literally post not only usually weekly on this channel, I also post weekly on my blog and monthly on my second blog. On top of working full time and helping take care of my mom and everything else in my life. So I don't always have a lot of time to watch television or do other stuff. And so most of the media I consume, I usually review. And you can say, yeah, that's a bit unhealthy, but I like to pick shows that I want to watch and make it a point of watching them so that I can review them. Rather than being bogged down by my production schedule, I try to shape my production schedule to produce and consume things that I enjoy, rather to use it as a vehicle for my own entertainment, if that helps. I think that's that's a good perspective on it, though you can disagree in the comments, and I would love to hear your opinion. So Ryan, what have you been watching lately on the television? Well, bitch, I haven't owned a television since the first year of college, and that was because I won that in a raffle. But what did I watch on the small screen? Well, let me tell you. I guess the last time that I did an entertainment corner, I actually had to look through my book and find this, was day 20, where I talked about, Blood Ride, Sense8, and I believe one other show, but I do not remember what it is off the top of my head, and I'm not going to look it up, so just watch that video if you want to know. Intrigue. Anyway, so I'm trying to really think back, because as I said, it's been 20 days since the last time I talked about what I've been watching, and I've watched a few things. Let's see, you can check out, I'll mention a few of the stuff that I've watched on my Boolean blog, but I'm also going to just mention everything else. So first up, Quibi was announced beginning of this month. It came out, I believe, the 3rd, or sometime similar. I had a 24-hour early access because I was a pre-register. And so I got to, watch some of, the shows before everyone else did, which was kind of cool. Was not the biggest fan of Quibi. It was interesting enough. It was high enough quality. I just felt the pacing just really didn't hold on to me. And I feel like there was actually a lot of really great criticisms. Mostly, a lot of people said that Quibi just had a really poor timing. Unforeseen, though. Simply because their entire marketing plan is for people with 5 minutes of time, if you're in commute, if you're on a break, that type of thing to get entertainment, which I think is a grand and bold idea. When I'm I don't actually take breaks at work just because, I don't know, I don't really need them. It's not as hectic or stressful as a job as some other kitchens, so I don't really feel the need to take a break. I don't know how to explain it. But, pretty much, that is what the idea for Quibi is. And so it's just with everyone at home and the fact that they literally have not been able to cast it to, any of the TVs, which I get it. They are a mobile-centric platform, but people like to watch shit on their television. It's just how it is. Like, even when I have, like, the option to, like, watch things on my phone, I will literally watch, like, movies and TV shows. Actually, mostly just movies. I usually like to watch TV shows on my phone, but I'll watch movies on my laptop just because it's bigger. And, like, I don't have to hold my phone, because that sucks. No one likes holding the phone. That's why they make, like, phone stands and stuff like that. Anyway, getting off track. I watched a bunch of shows from that, like, just binge them all because you could literally binge an entire series in an hour. And there were some good ones. I like some of the stories. I'm not going to get into any of them, though, mostly just because, really, it's, since they're so short, there's very little meat to the actual plot. And so that is like one of the other downsides to it. If you want my full, like, thoughts on this matter, I'm going to probably link a lot of the stuff I mentioned that I actually wrote on my Boolean blog down below. In, like, the doobly-doo, whatever people call it these days. So, moving on, I'm trying to think about what else I actually watched. I watched The Sinner. I loved it. It was great. Apparently, it's an anthology series, and I'll actually just give you a synopsis for fun. Pretty much, The Sinner is about this woman named Cora, and she's at the beach with her husband and kid, and she's, like, peeling a pear with a knife and feeding it to her kid. And she's like, this is lovely. I got a man by my side. I have a bouncing baby boy. It is a beautiful day at the beach. And then somebody starts playing Big Black Delta's Hugging and Kissing. And it's like, hugging and kissing, pushing and shoving, ooh. And she's like, wow, excuse me while I go stab a bitch. And then he ran into her knife 7 times. And everyone's just like, yo, Cora, why you stab a bitch? And she's like, I don't fucking know. And so the entire thing is like this kind of like unreliable narrator, sort of intrigue-ass plot, where everyone's trying to figure out like, hey, Cora, where'd you, like, what's with all this bullshit in, like, your past? Why don't you remember anything? What happened to your sister? Like, it's a big, like, and there's all these other elements. There's, like, drugs and Carrie-esque abuse households and, like, sad, sick children. Like, there's a little bit of everything added to the stew pot. And it's just fucking great. Like, as crime dramas go, it was, like, a big oof, like, big 10 out of 10 story-wise, and, like, it was sexy. And so The Sinner was just probably one of the funnest crime dramas that I actually saw, and I regret so much for, like, sleeping on it. And if you want to hear more about that, because apparently this is the episode where I decided to pimp my blog a lot, I wrote about that. And I'm trying to think, let's see. Because I do 4 different articles, usually, per month. And so, yeah, let's see. We had the TV show, we had a movie, and the last one was a podcast, but that was the Penumbra, which was pretty good. I want to, like, try to focus this on, like, traditional visual mediums, though. So, Entertainment Quarter is usually me talking about TV shows and movies, but I might talk about, like, other stuff near the end of this, because mostly this one is a bit more freeform than my last Entertainment Corner. Sorry if you hate it, sorry if I suck, whatever. I just want to talk about TV shows and movies, so you're going to have to deal with it. So moving on, I'm thinking, let's see, after that I watched both forms of Cabin Fever. It is a horror movie. First one was in 2002. It's directed by Eli Roth, and it premiered, I believe, on the Tribeca Film Festival. Got really good reviews. It was actually the last film that was produced on the film festival. And then they remade it in 2016 with a man named Travis Zarni was the director. And so they actually filmed that up in Portland, which I thought was interesting. The Wikipedia page says Portland, Oregon. And, like, I wonder if they meant Monona County or if they actually meant, like, the city of Portland. Because, who knows? Like, I don't really visit up north very much. I've never really been to the Dales. I really haven't even been to Portland or even around Mount Noma at all. So I don't really know what, like, the outskirts of the town looks like. But Portland's pretty high-rise for Oregon. So, like, it was kind of weird that, like, I wouldn't have expected it to have been shot, like, with, like, a huge-ass city, like, maybe a mile away. But haze. Instead of, like, talking about boring production details like some fucking nerd, What's Cabin Fever about? Let me tell you. Pretty much 5 random ass college students, they're like, oh yeah, we want to pate. And we're gonna go up to some cabin in the woods and get crunk and flash our titties or something. Whatever party kids do. And so they're there, and they're partying, and pretty much some shit happens, and they start getting infected with this horrifying flesh-eating bacteria. And people are like, wow, that sucks. And so, I'm being facetious right now, because when am I anything but pretty much what I really enjoyed about Cabin Fever was that it was a very essentially intimate viral outbreak movie. Instead of a lot of other movies that deal with the subject like 28 Days Later or Pandemic or Contagion, some of these I have not seen, is all of a much broader scope. It's a global pandemic. But in this case, they're really dealing with an initial outbreak where you see the patient zero and then these kids get affected. So it's really, interestingly enough, both a combination of horror tropes, but brought into a very interesting and different story than we're used to. You have a lot of and a lot of people might criticize it. They criticize a lot the remake, even though, if we're really being honest, very few things changed from the remake. Yeah, they cut out some of Eli Roth's jokes. They cut out some of the more, weirder, surreal moments in the film. And they, removed all the 90s things where, they used gay as a slur. And I'm just like, I'm sorry that you don't have your 90s pejoratives. Sad boys, I know, so sad, who cares? But, damn it, I got off track. Give me a second to get back to my thoughts. Basically, there was a lot of horror tropes. There was a lot of, if you're being a dick, cliches in both scripts. The characters are very archetypic, but they work because that is how tropes are used. So many people shit on tropes or shit on cliches saying, oh, if you have a trope character, you're a shit writer. Where most people understand that tropes can give you a lot of information about people, and you can also use tropes to help, define biases, or, create contrast by, averting them at certain points. For instance, just as a comparison, though I know I'm getting off beat, let's talk about Gone Girl, right? You have this trope that, the husband always does it, the woman is always, the victim in these situations. However, Gillian Flynn uses those biases and those tropes that we're so used to, and she averts them by creating a story where the man is still a piece of shit, but he didn't murder his wife. Sorry, spoilers. And the woman is the antagonist. So simply by being aware and averting those tropes, she created a very fascinating and interesting story that still played with the ideas that those tropes were. Same way, Eli Roth used horror tropes. He used the slut character, and he used, the rich boy asshole, and the idiot stoner friend, and, the boy next door who wanted to, sleep with his best friend. We have seen that 100 times in horror movies, but we also understand those dynamics. We don't have to be explained who these characters are as deep as a level, because we understand them culturally. Just as one understands things like match cuts or other cinematic effects, such as people understand, writing conventions in written work. Tropes are really just a shorthand that delivers information to the audience with much more clarity and understanding than you can always have with entirely originally cast characters. For instance, if Cabin Fever was about, 5 athletic lesbians who also, play, all these other characterizations and are, in different STEM fields, you would have to spend more time talking about each one. Maybe Patricia, she has this whole backstory and, all of these other things. Maybe one of them has an eating disorder and you have to characterize that. Those would be, very complex characters. They would all have very, unique personalities. But you would also spend so much of the movie explaining who they are, or you would have the characterization be so subtle or vague that you won't have enough time to build them up enough to sympathize them when they eventually die. And that's kind of the truth. Horror movie characters die in a horror movie, especially if it's a slasher type film, which Cabin Fever was. And so, really, the use of tropes is paramount in a lot of slasher films because you need to have that clarity of character by the time that people are dying off like flies. Otherwise, you have to have that shortcut to sympathize with the character. Otherwise, it's just very difficult to really care that they're dying. Because, yeah, horror movies are kind of like, nameless random people. But if you have that little bit of flavor that you understand the dynamic and how they play in, you can better enjoy the movie and the emotional stakes of it. Even if, when you look back, the actual characterization is a bit low. I am enjoying this discussion, and I'm going to bring in one more movie as a counterpoint, and then I'm going to move on. Let's take, As Above, So Below. Basically, you had a bunch of characters who in the story all had a sort of dirty secret in their backstory. And this is minor spoilers or major spoilers. It's spoilers regardless. If you want to watch this movie, stop watching and I'll just basically mute this until I put up a peace sign or something, okay? And so pretty much in that one, everyone has this sort of dark secret to it. And so, for instance, I'm going to spoil one of the characters, Papillon. He essentially somehow, caused somebody's death in a car fire. And they only really hint at this in the movie. At the beginning, where they're setting up and introducing the characters, they only vaguely hint at what a lot of the people's, dark secrets are for some of the tertiary cast. For the main two, you get a good sense of what it is, and it plays into the emotional states. But for the rest, it is very vague what they did wrong. And so, pretty much with that, their amount of characterization was much too subtle to really actually have the emotional impact they wanted in the third act of the movie. And that is because, they wanted to have these deep, complex characters, but they didn't spend enough time setting them up and growing those bonds before they, use that as a plot device. If you want to have characterization affect a character, you really have to characterize them enough to justify that involvement in the plot. And that is just a case of it. Anyway, guys, spoilers over. Thank you for staying with me. We're going to move on now because I've been chatting too long about literary tropes in horror fiction, and you're probably bored to fucking tears. I'm sorry. Sue me in the comments. Let's move on to as pretty much everything I've been watching, for the blog. And I loved all of it. For the most part, the stuff I didn't like, I say in the blog post, so just read those. Moving on, what have I been watching that isn't part of blogging, Ryan? Well, I'm glad you asked. Ah, precious. Love ya. Anyway, probably, first off, I'm a fucking weeb, which you might know from me talking way too much about anime or something. I don't think I'm a weeb enough on this channel. Let's change that, fam. And I watched Kill la Kill. If you don't know what Kill la Kill is, let me tell you. Kill la Kill is basically a comedy action anime that involves a high school girl whose name I cannot remember at the top of my head, but hopefully I know how to edit and research. And she goes and beats people up with a giant, blade of a scissor. Not a pair of scissors, but a singular sizz, or whatever you call half a pair of scissors. Since the phrase, pair obviously implies that, they're individualized? Yeah, so she just has this, scissor blade that she, beats people up with, and it's, her giant sword. Also, she has a, sailor... Oh, give me a second. She has, one of those, Japanese sailor outfits that when she battles, basically just is fan service. And the battle scenes are literally just beating people up while also showing all that titty. And you're like, wow, Ryan, you sound like a fucking perv, you hentai bitch. And I'm just excuse you. Now, yes, let's do I will address the moment of fan service. I find it can be a bit gratuitous at times, but it is played very jovially. It does, I guess, satirize people's enjoyment of it at the same time. And they also spend 3 entire episodes discussing how the fan service is an important part of the plot. And I'm like, if they're going to take that much time to characterize and describe how the actor, how, like, the character feels about showing a titty on screen, I feel like, they at least did that. There's a reason why the character is, like, giving fan service. There's a way that the fan service affects people realistically. And they also spend a lot of time discussing, like, why is part of the plot, how the character feels about, like, all this stuff. It is, and you can say the fan service is never justified, but they spend a lot of time actually, like, thinking about how the fan service affects the show. And I think, like, if you're going to have fan service, that's probably the way to do it. I don't need fan service in my anime, but I ain't going to say that I don't enjoy it, because I would be a fucking liar. There we go. What else have you watched, Ryan? Let's see. So, I went back to my, I don't know what you call it. Everyone has that sort of, like, one show on Netflix that they watch when they don't have, like, anything else to watch. Sort of that sort of, dense television programming where there's, like, 50 seasons of it. And it's good. And it's good, like, to binge. But you also, like, it's turn your mind off type television. Where it's a good story, it has good characters. But it's also just, it's the meat and potatoes of television. And for me, what I've been watching is I love crime procedurals. So, Criminal Minds. I did not used to love Criminal Minds as a kid. I thought it was dark. I thought it was edgy. I didn't understand, like, the characters at all. But I started watching it again, like, as an adult, and I actually really loved it. And I think if you watch it from the beginning, or at least from the first couple seasons, you definitely get a lot more into the show. It's just like watching sort of like, a novella. You really have to understand the characterizations between the characters to get a lot of the depth to their interactions in their relationship. Because when I first, like, watched Criminal Minds, I kind of got that, like, Penelope and, oh, I can't remember his name. Fuck. I remember his name. I'm just going to put, like, his face here and, like, his name here, and we'll work it out. Basically, her and him, like, you kind of get this, like, a thing there, but, like, you never really understand. I never really understood if it was, like, sexual or platonic or anything like that. But, like, watching the show from the beginning, I understood that, like, they're close friends, that the flirting was platonic. I understood, like, a lot more in depth for, like, other characters, like Dr. Reed or Hotchner. And so, you really get a better sense of who these characters are and how they play out. Because Criminal Minds is, first and foremost, a crime procedural, but it also does have a very strong drama aspect to its, like, B-plot. These characters have backstories which affect their world. Criminal Minds acts as a very real and gritty form of crime procedurals. They try to be very realistic of what they show, and they have very similar interactions. And I think it's nice because, yeah, they have these turns where it's maudlin, but they also have, like, a lot of camaraderie between the people, and they really have a very strong identity as a group. I think that's really great. Because I think some of the best crime procedurals that really can hold your interest and just be some fantastic television are the ones where the group of, like, police officers or forensic analysts or things like that can really bond together. Some of my favorite shows just have really great interactions between all of the, like, characters outside of the story. Some do it better than others. Like Bones, a lot of, like, B-plot about the characters, even more so than Criminal Minds. While on the other hand, the original CSI, literally, what can you tell me about, like, the stuff they did, except, like, that one guy was dating a stripper. Literally nothing else, like, outside of, like, the murders happened in CSI in the first season. I'm just saying. But yeah, I like Criminal Minds. I'm on season 6 right now, so JJ just left, and I'm, like, so sad because I love JJ. And so it's like, who's going to replace her? Because I don't even watch Criminal Minds. I didn't even, like, watch Criminal Minds, like, when I was a kid, so I missed, like, most of the later seasons. And so I don't even remember, like, when half of, like, the people that show up in, like, the newer seasons show up. It's still crazy to think that Gideon was only, like, in the first 2 seasons of the show, because every time I see, like, the actor's face, I'm just like, is that Gideon from Criminal Minds? Even though he's been, like, replaced by Rossi for, like, 4 seasons, and you're like, what? Side note, just because I'm having fun talking, I really liked how NCIS dealt with the leaving of Michael Weatherly and Cote de Pablo, just because I felt that they replaced the cast really well. But I promised myself I would stop watching NCIS if any of these 3 things happened. Mark Harmon left, Polly Peretti left, or the actor who played Ducky, whose name I usually can remember off the top of my head, passes away. Polly Peretti left, I stopped watching it. To be honest, I stopped watching it long before that, just because the plot was kind of like petering out, if I'm being honest. I like NCIS, but it can be very dry at times, even if I love the character dynamics that keep me interested. Side note, probably favorite season is 3rd or 4th, just because really good dynamics. Moving on, Ryan, what else have you watched? So let me think about that for a second. Thank you. Midnight Gospel. I checked it out. It was by the guy who either directed, produced, or animated, one of the 3, Adventure Time, which I have not really watched that many episodes of, but I know, like, everyone who's into animation says it's fantastic, and they're like, Bubbline is bae, and we ship it, and we just need, like, more LGBT inclusive, like, animation that deals with, like, hard adult topics in a way that children can understand, and I agree with that. And, like, I never realized that Adventure Time had, like, such deep characterization and relationships, because the first few episodes I watched, I'm just like, this is fun and zany. And I just assumed it was, like, most, like, other cartoons that have the status quo, yo. Sorry, I make a Jello Apocalypse reference, apparently. Anyway. And so, it's by that guy, and so so it's like, I'm thinking, okay, this has some zany animation, right? And it takes all of its audio, pretty much, well, takes most of its audio, at least the interview parts, from something called, I think, the Truman Family Hour, I believe what it's called. And it's basically just people, like, talking about, like, life, death, philosophy, and the meaning of the universe. And I'm like, okie dokie, get it, fam. And so, it's just a really strange juxtaposition. Because, like, audibly, you're listening to what is essentially just a very high-end, cerebral discussion about, like, very philosophical, about all sorts of things, like, the importance of self, or, like, the meaning of death, or, I guess, religion and philosophy, and, like, all these other things. And there's some really interesting, like, ideas there, and I love, like, the conversation, because I love podcasts. So I'm just like, I can get behind the audio, even though a lot of the stuff does pass over my head, because I have not read a lot of, like, philosophers, and I barely understand what existentialism is. So, sue me. On the other side, you have basically these very trippy, very psychedelic visuals. Literally, I watched the trailer and I'm thinking, this would be something I would totally smoke, too. Because I feel like either drugs were taken to watch this, or drugs were taken to make this. Because it's that kind of psychedelic, where it's wacky and chaotic and odd, and just very brightly colored. And, I'm okay with, like, very stylized, like, artistic visuals. One of my favorite ones that animations that I watched recently was, I think it was called Helga, and I'll put a, like, picture there so that you can actually see what I'm talking about. And that just had, like, a very stylized one, because it was based on a bunch of graphic novels. But yeah, so, like, it was very trippy. I liked it. It was okay, but it was also, like, one of those types of shows that, like, you can't really binge, because it kind of, like, burns out, like, your brain after, like, a couple, like, episodes, and you're just like, there's too much in here now, and I can't deal with that. But I thought it was pretty interesting. A lot of people criticize it for not having a really advanced plot, but I feel like the show was always meant to be very anthological. And I don't think that anthologies necessarily need to have an overarching plot. I think it's perfectly okay to have episodic or Monster of the Week style episodes. And there's a lot of shows I love that did that. Speaking of episodic or monster of the week type shows, let's discuss Supernatural, which I am rewatching for like the third time. First time I watched it was with my mom. She kept skipping seasons, so I had no idea what was happening half the time, but like the individual episodes were pretty good. Second time I was watching it, it was, I think, last year. My roommates put it on because they watched a lot of television, which that's not a criticism. They just watched a lot of television. And I would usually, like, miss out on a bunch of episodes as well. So I would usually, like, see only, like, parts of each season. But I got a better understanding of what was going on. Because at first I thought it was like, wow, Cassiel should, like, not be in this show so soon. But, like, when I rewatched it, I was like, okay, so he doesn't come in, like, the second or third season, which is what I thought happened. And so, like, I feel there's a good enough build-up for that. I'm currently halfway through season 3, I believe. And so, pretty much, Ruby's a thing, and, like, Sam hasn't fucked her yet, because he's not, like, a giant demon hoe yet. But, like, she's just like, hey, I just want to save you, because, like, Demon made a pact with the Crossbow Demons, hashtag spoilers. And, yeah. Also, like, I'm sorry if I spoiled any of this, like, Mikopa. Anyway, but pretty much, like, I've been watching it, and I like it, for the most part. I did notice that there is a lot of, like, a lot of the characters in the show make a lot of, like, weird, like, queer-baiting jokes about, like, Sam and Dean, which I didn't really notice the first time I watched the show. And it's like, we get it, like, early 2000s, like, shows, you have to queer-bait the characters. Sherlock, that's gay. Like, and so, like, there's a lot of things where everyone just, like, assumes that, like, these two men are just, like, lesbian lovers. And I'm thinking, nope, they're brothers and that's super fucking creepy. But that does not stop the fandom. That being said, I definitely agree that, well, like, the characters just make jokes about it, which I think, like, I get it, like, funny humor, like, oh, we're not gay, no homo, hashtag, haha. I definitely think there is some egregious queer-baiting going on with Cassiel and Dean, which, I get it, I technically haven't reached that part in the series yet, but I've seen the show before, and I'm just like, it is my firm, honest opinion that Dean is clearly a closeted bi man, and they need to get this shit together, writers, and just make that fucking shit canon. Okay, and if you don't like Destiel, well, you obviously are not watching the same show I am, so I am sorry. You can't tell me there is no homo between that, because it is like 5 kinds of homo. And that is just how the cookie crumbles. So pretty much, that is all the stuff I've watched for like the last 20 days. I'm just gonna give, like, while we're here, why not? Let's talk about, like, what else I've been consuming. Haven't really been listening to that many podcasts since the stuff I watched last month. That was Penumbra Project. Pretty good. I'll put more links down below in the description. It's gonna be a fucking, like, click farm down there, but there you go. And let's see. I've actually been reading a lot more. I've been trying to, like, get back into reading, and I've been having so much fun with it. Let's see, I think I've read 3 books so far, and I'm really close to, like, finishing 2 more. That'll be, American Gods by Neil Gaiman, which I am really enjoying, and Sister Age by MFK Fisher, which is okay. And, like, there'll be, like, little book images floating by me, because that's why I sit on this side of the screen, so I can do that. And I'm trying to think, anything else I've been really listening to lately? Oh, I've been watching a fuck ton of BookTube. Is YouTube entertainment? I certainly hope so, because I watch way too much of it. And so, like, I'm finding, like, a lot of booktubers I really love. I'm just going to name a few, not because, like, I'm an SAO whore, but because, like, this is actually people I enjoy watching, and I want to give you these recommendations. Books with Lala, she's really cool. I've been watching a fuck ton of her videos, and she's just, I love her style. I like, just, she has this, like, very fun, like, mom personality, and it's just, like, it's such a wholesome, like, channel, and I really enjoy watching it. I also like, that I feel like a lot of creators on, like, TV shows, they have this, like, whole, like, family person persona, and they overplay it, like, everything on HGTV. But it's nice to also see creators that like have a family, but they don't like exploit them like, you know, those family vloggers you see, which I just hate. Sorry, that's an off topic, and there is no shade. But anyway, like I just learned like I think I got into it by watching her unhaul series where she like unhauls like her TBR, which is like this huge closet. And that is honestly like hashtag library goals. What else have I been watching? Chandler Ainsley, I believe her name is. And I've been watching, like, you know, a lot of her stuff. I think she reads mostly romances. And so I'm not, like, the biggest, like, romance person. Because, like, I know I'm a giant stereotype. Like, I'm a dude. Love and healthy, like, stable relationships. Ugh. But anyway. Like, I watched some of her stuff. I like listening to her voice. It's very soothing, and that's kind of like one of the reasons why I like listen to YouTubers. Oh, let's see. I should probably like name some guy YouTubers just because, like, you know, only one I can really think of that comes to my mind is Reading with Jesse. He had a really fun personality, so like I was watching like one of his book tags, and it was like so much fun. There's also I think Caleb Johnson is his name, and so like I mostly just been watching him like read like a bunch of like fucked up like Harlequin romances, and that's just hilarious. I should try to think of like one more that I've been watching that I really enjoy. Oh, kind of like the person that got me into BookTube, that like kind of got me on like, you know, this watching binge, has been Read with Cindy. I watched her series on the Court of Mist and Fury. I think that's what it's called. That whole like Sarah J. Maas series with like the fairies with like the huge penises or something. And honestly, I I mentioned it before, but I do kind of want to I want to like dip my toe in BookTube. I want to like, you know, try that shit out because like I watched this stuff and it looks so much fun, and like I want to try to like, you know, enter into that niche. And so that's definitely something I'm going to be reading because I don't read young adult very much. I definitely don't read like, you know, that sort of like paranormal romance. That type of paranormal romance. I do read paranormal fiction and paranormal romance, but not that kind. Like where it's like the sort of isekai thing where, I don't know, it's much more, I guess, shoujo? Yeah, it's a bit more like shoujo than like I'm used to, and I was never a big fan of fruit baskets. I know, I'm horrible. How dare I diss on fruit baskets, but anyway. Yeah, so I watched like her series about it, and she's just like, I'm gonna stick this Sarah J. Maas in my Sarah J. ass, and I'm just like, oh woo. Precious. I love it. Subscribe. And so it was just, yeah, I like started watching that, and then I started like watching all these like other people. And pretty much like, you know, I've been watching a lot of BookTube recently. I kind of think like, you know, it's definitely probably a new phase in like, you know, my YouTube watching, because I tend to like, you know, watch. I used to be really big into like commentary videos, and then I like used to be really big into like, you know, um, animation reviews. I used to watch so many like, you know, videos about like, you know, reviewing anime or reviewing animation or like, you know, all these other things, like also like, you know, really obscure shit like Rhapsody Kids or whatever. Like I would watch that stuff. Oh, I remember the guy that made those, Saber Spock. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna stop rattling off YouTubers' names and talking ad nauseum about like, you know, horror tropes and all that other bullshit. Because I have shit to do today, and you have shit to do too, and I ain't gonna dish your time like that. Anyway, guys, just remember there are a fuck ton of things you can do to help me grow my channel. Always like, comment, and subscribe. Just fucking roast me in the comments if I said something that pissed you off about your favorite TV show, and tell me what is your favorite supernatural ship. And if it's and it's not Death you're canceled. I'm just joking. You can like whatever you want. Love is love. Anyway, also, you can subscribe. I will let you do that. Do not worry. I will not be upset if you do that. So, like, you know, it lets me, like, you know, grow my channel. And if you aren't, like, you know, sure if you want to subscribe, tell me what I'm doing wrong. If there's stuff that you really enjoyed, but I don't make enough of it, if there's stuff that you did not enjoy, and I make too much of that, you gotta tell me, because I'm a dumb bitch. I'm not gonna know either way. And yeah, like, help me grow my channel. Let me know what you want to see, because I want to make stuff I enjoy making and that you enjoy watching. And as always, I'm gonna shut the fuck up, This is Falsebooles123, and I'm signing off.